So now we get to the first big cost that flows into the work order, and that's materials. How do materials get charged to a work order? Where do they come from? What do we do with some materials that we might put back into stock? That's what this module is about here. So how materials move to the work order. Materials and inventory sit in account 154, plant materials and operating supplies, until they are issued to a project. So best practice is when you buy inventory is put it in account 154. And in the work order process, the crew will request materials through your computer system if you have an ERP system, or perhaps they use paper for some of that. In any case, materials are requested for the project, and the reference on the materials issued ticket or the request would be this work order 2024-412. So then the storekeeper or the crew goes out and pulls the items and records the issue in the inventory system. So through a materials issued ticket or keyed in through the interface that you have with your inventory system and your work order system. In any case, now the materials are out of 154 materials and supplies, and they are charged to the work order at the weighted average cost. And sometimes first in, first out, but FERC requires weighted average cost. And so those materials are charged to the work order at that cost. So there's a journal entry generated mainly internally based on your accounting system. But in any case, inventory is reduced and construction work in progress is increased. We see in our example here for work order 2024-412, materials are issued from stores. We're going to issue 40 class 4 treated poles. We're going to issue conductor, and we're going to issue hardware, insulators, cross arms. Total materials issued are $35,880. That gets charged to the work order, and what we mean by charged is the work order balance is increased by $35,880, a debit to account 107, construction work in progress, and the credit goes to inventory, plant materials and supplies, account 154. Now, as I said, best practice is when you buy inventory, charge it directly to account 154. That's a good internal control. It is a best practice so that you can track inventory, price it properly, and account for it and efficiently issue it for projects, and know what you have on hand for other projects when it goes to reordering inventory and so on. Now, sometimes you'll have a special project where you'll buy inventory and you charge it right to the work order. If you do that, you need to be specific about how that works, have a work order process set up in place, and sign-offs at the supervisory level that is being done. So rather than going through account 154, we buy it off the truck and directly charge it to account 107, construction work in progress. Now, sometimes during the construction process, we'll be able to reuse some of the materials that are providing service to our customers. Maybe we're replacing poles that still have somewhat of a use and a value to us, maybe in a less traffic place or whatever, but we can't bear to throw it out yet. We might want to reuse that. Well, we call that salvage. And so salvage, if it has any value, and generally we consider the value of salvage of a unit of property to be the current weighted average cost in inventory. So if our inventory says that 45-foot poles are valued at $500, and we take down a 45-foot pole and put it back into inventory, the value of that pole is $500 because we avoided buying another pole. There's also removal costs. So on a project, we'll be putting up new units of construction, and we'll be taking down the old. And we call that removal. So labor and equipment that is used to remove old plant and service is a retirement cost, not a new capital cost. Although I will say that in many utilities, there is no distinction between cost of removal and cost of addition. But if you're strictly following RUS and FERC, you would record removal cost, and we would charge that to the retirement sub-account, account 108, or directly to an expense. That is the best practice for that. So now we have materials that are charged to construction work in progress so far, $35,880. All the three material categories, poles, conductor, hardware, those are now in construction work in progress. They aren't in inventory anymore. And so we've reduced inventory, and the project is still going. We've only recorded material costs. We still have labor, equipment, and other overheads that we need to charge. And no plant and service accounts have been touched yet. The project is still going. We haven't classified the work. So at the end of Module 2, your key takeaways are materials flow from account 154, which is inventory, over to account 107, construction work in progress. Via a store's requisition, we want inventory, so we take it out of the inventory account, we put it into the project. Materials can also be purchased directly and charged to a work order. That is not necessarily a best practice, but it does happen, especially on specialty type inventory that you're going to use just for a specific project. You would do that. Salvage reduces the capitalized cost of the new installation, and then cost of removal or retirement costs, not new capital costs. Although I would say it's about 50-50 on whether we record those as retirement costs versus retirement costs. And removal costs are retirement costs, not new capital costs. And so with those takeaways, we've covered the materials part of our project 2024-412, and we'll see what happens next.